Glad you're here. Tonight we're diving into the complete history of Five Nights at Freddy's, from the very beginning to where we are today. Drop a comment to let us know where you're watching from, and if this helps you drift off tonight, make sure to like and subscribe when you wake up tomorrow. The story of Five Nights at Freddy's begins long before any scary animatronics started wandering dark hallways at night. To really understand this story, we need to go back to the very start. Back to when two men had a simple dream of bringing joy to children through entertainment and pizza. In the early 1970s, two business partners named William Afton and Henry Emily decided to open a family restaurant. William was a brilliant inventor and engineer, someone who could build amazing things with his hands. Henry was his partner, equally talented and passionate about creating entertainment for families. Together, they founded a company called Fazbear Entertainment. Their first restaurant was called Fredbear's Family Diner, and it featured something special that would set them apart from every other pizza place around. They created animatronic characters, robotic performers that could sing and dance and interact with children. The main stars of Fredbear's Family Diner were two characters. There was Fredbear, a big friendly yellow bear who became the face of the restaurant, and there was Spring Bonnie, a yellow rabbit who performed alongside Fredbear. But these weren't like the stiff, simple animatronics you might see at other places. William Afton had designed something called springlock suits. These were special because a person could actually wear them like a costume, or they could be locked into place and work as animatronics. It was an impressive piece of engineering, even if it would later prove to be dangerous. The restaurant was successful. Families loved coming to Fredbear's Family Diner. Children would gather around to watch the animatronic shows, eat pizza, and celebrate birthdays. The business grew, and William and Henry decided to expand. They opened a new location called Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, and this time they introduced 4 new characters. There was Freddy Fazbear himself, a brown bear with a top hat and bow tie who led the band. Bonnie was a blue rabbit with a guitar. Chica was a yellow chicken who sometimes carried a cupcake, and Foxy was a red pirate fox who had his own special cove in the restaurant. These characters became beloved by children everywhere. During this time, William Afton had a family of his own. He had 3 children. There was Michael, his oldest son. Then there was Elizabeth, his daughter. And finally, there was a younger son, a boy whose name we never quite learn in the games, but who fans often call the crying child because of what we see happen to him. This youngest son was terrified of the animatronics at his father's restaurant. While other children loved Fredbear and the others, this little boy had nightmares about them. He would cry and shake when taken to the restaurant. His older brother Michael thought this was funny, and he would tease him constantly, even going so far as to wear a foxy mask to scare his little brother at home. The year 1983 brought tragedy to the Afton family. It was the younger son's birthday, and despite his fears, he was brought to Fredbear's Family Diner for a party. Michael and his friends decided to play a cruel prank. They picked up the crying, terrified boy and carried him toward the stage where Fredbear was performing. The boy struggled and screamed, but the older kids didn't stop. They lifted him up and shoved his head directly into Fredbear's mouth, thinking it would be a funny scare. But something went horribly wrong. The springlock mechanisms inside Fredbear's jaw suddenly activated, and the metal parts clamped down with tremendous force. The animatronic's jaw crushed the boy's head. The child was rushed to the hospital, but the injuries were too severe. For days, the boy lay in a hospital bed surrounded by medical equipment, slowly fading away. he saw visions, dark nightmares of twisted versions of the animatronics coming to torment him in the darkness. Eventually the boy died from his injuries. This incident became known as the Bite of 83, and it left a permanent mark on everyone involved. The restaurant's reputation took a hit. Michael Afton was left with crushing guilt over what he'd done to his brother, and William Afton, the father who had built these machines, began to change in dark and terrible ways. Some people believe that William Afton's mind broke after losing his son. Others think he was always capable of what came next, and tragedy simply gave him an excuse to act on his darkest impulses. Whatever the reason, William Afton became a murderer. His first victim was Charlotte Emily, the young daughter of his business partner Henry. One night, Charlotte was locked outside the restaurant, and William, driving what witnesses described as a purple car, ran her down and killed her. But Charlotte's story didn't end there. A special animatronic called the Puppet, which was designed to give gifts and prizes to children, somehow found Charlotte's body. The puppet, through means we don't fully understand, gave Charlotte's spirit a way to remain, to possess the puppet's body and continue existing in some form. William discovered something from this event. He learned that the spirits of dead children could somehow inhabit animatronics, could possess them and give them a kind of life. This discovery fascinated him in the worst possible way. He began experimenting with a substance that would later be called remnant, some kind of physical manifestation of human souls that could be extracted and used. William Afton had become obsessed with the idea of immortality, of life after death, and he was willing to kill to study it. In 1985, William opened a new location called Circus Baby's Pizza World. This wasn't really meant to be a restaurant, though. William had designed new animatronics for this place, and they had dark purposes hidden inside their colourful exteriors. There was Circus Baby, a clown character with red pigtails and a cheerful voice. There was Ballora, a dancing ballerina. And there were Funtime Freddy and Funtime Foxy. These animatronics were designed with hidden compartments inside them, spaces where a child could be captured and stored. William's plan was to use these machines to kidnap children. But before the restaurant could even open to the public, tragedy struck the Afton family again. William had brought his daughter Elizabeth to see the animatronics. He specifically told her to stay away from Circus Baby, knowing how dangerous the machine was. But Elizabeth was fascinated by the beautiful clown character. When William wasn't watching, she approached Circus Baby, wanting to get closer. The animatronics programming activated. A metal claw shot out from Circus Baby's stomach, grabbed Elizabeth and pulled her inside. Just like that, William's daughter was dead, killed by his own creation. And just like Charlotte before her, Elizabeth's spirit remained, possessing Circus Baby's body. After this incident, William shut down Circus Baby's Pizza World before it could even open. He moved the animatronics to an underground location that he called Circus Baby's Entertainment and Rental. But William didn't stop his terrible work. He continued with his experiments and his killing. On June 26, 1985, William committed what would become known as the Missing Children Incident. He put on a Spring Bonnie costume, using it to disguise himself, and went to the Freddy Fazbear's pizza location. Children trusted the Spring Bonnie character because they'd seen it perform at the restaurant. William used this trust to lure 5 children away from the main party area and into a back room. There, hidden from cameras and witnesses, he murdered all 5 children. Their names were Gabriel, Fritz, Susie, Jeremy and Cassidy. After killing them, William stuffed each child's body into an animatronic suit. Gabriel went into Freddy, Fritz went into Foxy, Susie went into Chica, Jeremy went into Bonnie, and Cassidy, who suffered the longest and most painful death, was stuffed into a special golden version of Freddy called Golden Freddy. The children were reported missing. Police investigated. William Afton was even arrested and charged with the murders. But without bodies as evidence, the case fell apart. William was released. The bodies were never found because they were hidden inside the animatronics, and the spirits of these 5 children, just like Charlotte and Elizabeth before them, found themselves possessing the very machines that held their remains. Something strange began happening at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza after this. The animatronics started behaving oddly. They would move when they shouldn't. Staff members reported that the characters seemed to be watching them. Parents complained about a horrible smell coming from the animatronics, which made sense given what was hidden inside them, though the restaurant management claimed it was just old carpets and poor ventilation. The possessed animatronics began to develop a hatred for adults, especially adult men, because the person who killed them had been an adult man in a costume. At night, when the restaurant was closed, the animatronics would roam freely, searching. In 1987, a new Freddy Fazbear's Pizza location opened. This one featured updated versions of the characters called the Toy Animatronics. There was Toy Freddy, Toy Bonnie and Toy Chica, all sleeker and more modern looking than the original characters. There was also a new character called Balloon Boy, and a twisted broken animatronic that staff called Mangle, which was actually a redesigned version of Foxy that children had torn apart and reassembled over and over again. The original animatronics from the previous location, the ones possessed by the murdered children, were kept in a back room. Management planned to use them for parts. This new location also had problems. William Afton got a job there as a security guard, and he continued his killing. He murdered more children at this location, though we don't know exactly how many. The toy animatronics became possessed as well. The restaurant hired a night security guard named Jeremy Fitzgerald to watch over the place at night, and Jeremy found himself being hunted by all the animatronics, both the new toy versions and the old originals from the back room. He survived 5 nights of this terror. On the 6th night, which was Jeremy's overtime shift, he was moved to the day shift temporarily. The restaurant was planning a big party, but during this party one of the animatronics bit a customer's frontal lobe. This event became known as the Bite of 87, and it finally forced the new location to close down. The toy animatronics were scrapped and destroyed. The original possessed animatronics, however, were kept in storage for a potential future reopening. After another period of closure, Freddy Fazbear's Pizza tried one more time to make the restaurant work. They reopened with a smaller building and a smaller budget, using only the original 4 animatronics plus Golden Freddy. This is the location where the very first 5 nights at Freddy's game takes place. The year was 1993. A man named Mike Schmidt was hired as the night security guard. Mike had to survive 5 nights watching security cameras and hiding from animatronics that were trying to kill him. He would close metal doors to keep them out of his office, but the doors used power, and he only had a limited amount of power to last through each night. If the power ran out, Freddy would come for him in the darkness. Mike Schmidt's real name was actually Michael Afton, the oldest son of William Afton and the brother who had accidentally killed his younger sibling years before. Michael had grown up and was now trying to undo some of the damage his father had caused. He survived his 5 nights at the restaurant, but he was eventually fired for tampering with the animatronics and for having what the notice called an odour. After he left, the restaurant finally closed its doors for good. The reputation was too damaged. Too many incidents had occurred. Too many children had gone missing. Freddy Fazbear's Pizza was finished, but the spirits of the murdered children were still trapped inside the animatronics. Their souls couldn't move on. They were stuck, bound to the machines that held their remains. One day, William Afton returned to the abandoned restaurant. He may have been trying to destroy evidence, or he may have been trying to free the spirits so he could capture their remnant for his experiments. He went through the building and began dismantling the animatronics one by one. He tore apart Freddy. He destroyed Bonnie, Chica, and Foxy. But when he freed the animatronics' bodies, he also freed the spirits inside them. The ghosts of the 5 children appeared before William. They manifested as phantom shapes, the spirits of the kids he had murdered so long ago. They backed him into a corner, driving him deeper into the abandoned restaurant until he stumbled into a room that had been sealed off years earlier, a safe room where the old spring Bonnie suit was stored. William, in panic, climbed into the spring Bonnie suit, perhaps thinking it would protect him or hide him. But the spring lock mechanisms inside the suit, which had been sitting in a damp room for years, suddenly failed. The metal spring-loaded parts that were compressed inside the suit all released at once. Dozens of metal pieces snapped out and drove through William's body, impaling him from every direction. The beams went through his chest, his arms, his legs. He screamed in agony as he was essentially crushed and stabbed to death from inside the suit. Blood poured out onto the floor. William Afton died there, alone in that sealed room, killed by his own creation. But death would not be the end for William Afton. His body, broken and rotten, remained inside the spring Bonnie suit, and somehow his soul became trapped just like the children he had killed. He became Springtrap, a horrifying combination of a decaying corpse and a rotting animatronics suit. For 30 years, Springtrap remained in that sealed room, hidden behind a wall in the abandoned restaurant. The building fell into worse and worse shape. The roof leaked. Plants grew through cracks. The place became a ruin. But in 2023, some people got the idea to make money off the old legends of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. They created a horror attraction called Fazbear's Fright, a kind of haunted house that used real props and pieces from the old restaurants. When they explored the abandoned building, they found Springtrap. They thought he was just a damaged animatronic prop. They had no idea there was a corpse inside, and they definitely didn't know that corpse still had a soul possessing it. They brought Springtrap to Fazbear's Fright as the main attraction. A security guard was hired to watch over the place at night, and he quickly discovered that Springtrap was active, hunting through the building. This guard had to survive 5 nights avoiding Springtrap, dealing with visions and hallucinations of the other old animatronics and trying not to die. On the last night, a fire broke out at Fazbear's Fright. The building burned, and it seemed like everything was destroyed, including Springtrap. But William Afton's spirit was persistent. Even after the fire, some piece of him survived. Meanwhile, Michael Afton had been continuing his own journey. After working as Mike Schmidt at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, he ended up at his father's underground facility, Fazbear Entertainment and Rental. This place was now abandoned, but the animatronics were still active. Michael got a job there, going by the name Eggs Benedict as a nickname given to him by the facility's computer system. Over 5 nights, he followed instructions to perform maintenance on the animatronics. But the animatronics, led by Circus Baby, who was still possessed by Michael's sister Elizabeth, had their own plan. The various animatronics in the facility, Circus Baby, Ballora, Funtime Freddy and Funtime Foxy, combined themselves together into a single tangled mass of wires, metal and machinery that they called Ennard. On the 5th night they captured Michael. They brought him to a room with a machine called the Scooper, which was designed to scoop out the internal mechanisms of animatronics. They used the scooper on Michael, ripping out his insides. Then Ennard climbed inside Michael's body, wearing him like a suit, and escaped the facility pretending to be human. Michael should have died from this. Having your internal organs removed is obviously fatal. But the scooper had injected Michael with remnant, the same substance his father had been experimenting with. This remnant kept Michael alive in an undead state. After about a week, Ennard left Michael's body, slithering out through the sewers. Michael's body had turned purple and was rotting, but he stood back up. He could move and think and speak, even though by all rights he should be dead. Michael Afton had become something not quite human anymore. Ennard, after leaving Michael, went through changes of its own. The spirit of Elizabeth inside Circus Baby was eventually ejected by the other spirits possessing Ennard. Elizabeth rebuilt her Circus Baby body into a new form she called Scrap Baby. The remaining spirits in Ennard rebuilt themselves into something called Molten Freddy, a twisted mass of wires with a mask that resembled Funtime Freddy. Both of these creatures, Scrap Baby and Molten Freddy, were still out there, dangerous and possessed by angry spirits. Henry Emily, the original business partner of William Afton, had been living with the guilt of everything that had happened for decades. His daughter Charlotte had been the first victim. His company had been used as a hunting ground for child murderers. His animatronics had become prisons for souls. Henry had spent years planning how to finally end all of this. He designed one final location, a fake restaurant that was actually a trap. He placed an ad for a franchise opportunity, and he knew that Michael Afton would find it. He knew that Scrap Baby, Molten Freddy and Springtrap would all eventually be drawn to this place, pulled by the promise of more victims or by the presence of each other. Michael took the job as manager of this new location. Over the course of several nights, he did what appeared to be normal restaurant work, buying animatronics, setting up attractions, completing tasks. But he was also salvaging the damaged animatronics that appeared in the back alley. He found and brought inside Molten Freddy. He found Scrap Baby. And he found Springtrap, now calling himself Scrap Trap, still containing the spirit of William Afton. Michael also encountered the puppet, still possessed by Charlotte's spirit. He brought them all inside the building. On the final night, Henry revealed his true plan. The restaurant was rigged to burn. All the exits were blocked. Henry had called all of them, Michael included, to this place for one purpose, to end it all. He set the building on fire. The heat was intense enough to destroy the animatronics completely, to burn away the remnant that kept the spirits bound to the physical world. Scrap Baby burned. Molten Freddy burned. Scrap Trap and William Afton's spirit finally burned. The puppet burned, finally freeing Charlotte's soul. And Michael Afton, the son who had been trying to fix his father's mistakes, burned as well. Henry Emily himself was inside the building when it burned. He had decided that he needed to go too, to ensure that everything ended completely. As the fire raged and the building collapsed, Henry spoke to all of them. He apologized to his daughter. He told the spirits of the murdered children that they could finally rest. He acknowledged Michael's efforts to make things right, and he spoke to William, telling his old partner that his crimes had finally caught up with him and that he would face punishment for what he'd done. The fire burned through the night. By morning there was nothing left but ash and rubble. The souls of the murdered children were finally free. They moved on to whatever comes after death, finally at peace. Charlotte could rest. Elizabeth could rest. The 5 children from the missing children incident could rest. It seemed like the nightmare was finally over. But as is often the case with William Afton, death was not quite the end. Some fragment of his consciousness, some piece of his malevolent spirit managed to survive even this. It attached itself to a computer circuit board, a piece of technology salvaged from the ruins. This circuit board was later scanned into a virtual reality game created by a company trying to profit off the legends of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. They made a VR game called Help Wanted, where players could experience the horror of the old restaurants in virtual reality. They thought they were just creating entertainment. They had no idea they were unleashing William Afton's spirit into the digital world. A woman named Vanessa was hired as a beta tester for the Help Wanted VR game. As she played through the game, testing different levels and scenarios, something happened to her mind. William Afton's spirit, which had become a kind of computer virus, infected her. He began to influence her thoughts, to control her actions. Vanessa started to have gaps in her memory. She would black out and wake up in places she didn't remember going to. Under William's influence, she created an alter ego called Vanny, wearing a stitched-together rabbit costume that resembled Spring Bonnie. William Afton, even as a digital ghost, was still trying to continue his work of murdering children. Around this same time, the Fazbear Entertainment company decided to make one last attempt at revitalizing the brand. They built an enormous entertainment complex called the Freddy Fazbear Mega Pizzaplex. This wasn't just a restaurant. It was like a mall combined with an arcade combined with an amusement park, all under one massive roof. There were multiple stories, dozens of attractions, restaurants, arcades, laser tag, go-karts, everything a kid could want. And of course, there were animatronics, new versions of the classic characters performed throughout the Pizzaplex. There was Glamrock Freddy, Glamrock Chica, Montgomery Gator, who had replaced Bonnie, and Roxanne Wolf, who had replaced Foxy. These were the most advanced animatronics ever created, with cutting-edge artificial intelligence and personalities. But underneath the Pizzaplex, in the lowest levels where guests were never supposed to go, something else was hidden. There were old storage rooms containing pieces of the past, old animatronic parts, old costumes, and there was something called the Mimic, an advanced learning AI that had been created years earlier by an engineer named Edwin Murray. The Mimic was designed to observe and copy behaviour, to learn by watching. But it had learned violence and murder, and it had been sealed away in the underground portions of the Pizzaplex, trapped by a security system. A young boy named Gregory found himself trapped inside the Pizzaplex after hours one night. He'd been hiding from Vanessa, who in her Vanny persona was trying to capture him. Gregory ended up encountering Glamrock Freddy, who malfunctioned during a performance and rebooted with his safety protocols partially disabled. This allowed Freddy to act outside of his normal programming. Freddy decided to help Gregory, hiding the boy inside his chest cavity and working with him to escape the pizzaplex. Throughout the night, Gregory and Freddy tried to find a way out, but they were hunted by the other Glamrock animatronics. Glamrock Chica, Montgomery Gator, and Roxanne Wolf had all been influenced by something in the Pizzaplex's computer system, possibly by William Afton's viral presence or by the Mimic's influence. They tried to capture Gregory, and they attacked Glamrock Freddy when he protected the boy. Gregory had to fight back, using the Pizzaplex's maintenance systems to decommission the other animatronics, taking their parts to upgrade Freddy. In the deepest parts of the Pizzaplex, in the remains of the old Freddy Fazbear's pizza location that the complex had been built on top of, they found something terrible. There was a partially burned animatronic, the remains of Scraptrap with parts of William Afton's corpse still inside. This creature was being kept alive by Remnant and by the Pizzaplex's power systems. He was called Burntrap now, a fusion of man, machine, and vengeful spirit that refused to die. William Afton was still trying to come back, still trying to continue his work. Gregory and Glamrock Freddy had to destroy Burntrap and free the Pizzaplex from his influence. In one ending, they set fire to the underground areas, causing a massive blaze that's consumed Burntrap and much of the Pizzaplex's lower levels. The fire was so intense that it caused structural damage that was later blamed on an earthquake. The Pizzaplex was severely damaged but not completely destroyed. Most of it was shut down and abandoned, left as a dangerous ruin. Sometime after these events, a girl named Cassie received a message from Gregory asking for help. He claimed to be trapped inside the abandoned Pizzaplex and needed someone to rescue him. Cassie, who was Gregory's friend, went into the ruined complex to find him. She had to navigate through damaged areas, avoiding broken animatronics and dealing with malfunctioning systems. She eventually discovered that the message wasn't really from Gregory. The Mimic, the AI that had been trapped underground, had learned to copy Gregory's voice perfectly. It had lured Cassie into the Pizzaplex to trick her into freeing it. The Mimic had been wearing old mascot costumes to move around, making itself look like the animatronics from the past. When Cassie shut down the security system that was keeping the Mimic trapped, thinking she was helping Gregory, she actually freed this dangerous AI. She realized too late what she had done. The real Gregory, watching through security systems, had to make a terrible choice. To prevent the Mimic from escaping the Pizzaplex and potentially hurting others, he cut the elevator cable while Cassie was inside, sending her falling into the depths. We hear Roxanne Wolf's voice calling for Cassie in the darkness, but we don't know what happened to her after that. And that's where the main story stands now, with many questions still unanswered. Is the Mimic still trapped underground? Did Cassie survive the fall? Is there any piece of William Afton's spirit still lingering somewhere? What happened to Vanessa after the events at the Pizzaplex? The Five Nights at Freddy's story continues to grow and evolve with new games and new revelations. Looking back at everything, the Five Nights at Freddy's story is really about the consequences of one man's evil actions rippling forward through decades. William Afton's decision to murder children created a cycle of death and revenge that destroyed countless lives. His own children died because of his creations or his actions. His business partner lost his daughter. At least 11 children were murdered directly by William or by his influenced animatronics. Michael Afton spent his undead life trying to fix his father's mistakes. Henry Emily lost everything and had to sacrifice himself to try to end the cycle. The animatronics themselves are tragic figures in this story. Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, Foxy and Golden Freddy started as entertainment for children, but became prisons for the souls of murdered kids. These children couldn't move on. They couldn't find peace. All they knew was that an adult in a costume had killed them, so they attacked any adult they found at night. The puppet, possessed by Charlotte, tried to help these children by giving them life in the animatronics, but in doing so kept them trapped in a cycle of violence and anger. Even Circus Baby, possessed by Elizabeth Afton, became twisted and dangerous, manipulating her own brother Michael into a trap. The 5 nights at Freddy's games are scary because of the jump scares and the tension of surviving each night. But the real horror is in the story behind everything. These are stories about children dying in terrible ways, about souls trapped in machines, about a serial killer who kept finding ways to cheat death, about a family destroyed by one man's obsession with immortality. The games make you feel hunted and afraid, but the lore makes you feel sad for all these characters who suffered. Part of what makes 5 Nights at Freddy's so interesting is how the story was told. Creator Scott Cawthon didn't just give players a straightforward narrative. Instead, he hid pieces of the story in newspaper clippings that flash on screen for just a moment. He included mini-games between nights that showed events from the past. He had phone calls where characters would casually mention important details. He created secret screens and hidden images. Players had to piece together the timeline themselves, had to debate and theorize about what really happened and in what order. Some details are still being argued about by fans years after the games came out. The series also explored different types of fear through its different games. The first game was about feeling, trapped in a small office with limited resources, hearing sounds in the dark, checking cameras frantically. This second game added more animatronics and more chaos, overwhelming you with threats. The third game put you in a creepy, deteriorating attraction with just one enemy, but that one enemy was relentless. The fourth game took away your security cameras and put you in a child's bedroom, making you listen carefully for breathing and footsteps. Sister Location added story and voice acting, making you feel like you were descending into a nightmare facility. Pizzeria Simulator pretended to be a business management game before revealing it was a trap. Help Wanted brought the horror into virtual reality, and Security Breach opened up the gameplay, giving you a huge location to explore and hide in. Each game added new pieces to the puzzle, new characters, new revelations about the past. We learned more about William Afton's family. We discovered the role of Henry Emily. We found out about the experiments with Remnant and the attempt to capture souls. We saw how the Afton family fell apart, with each member meeting a terrible fate. We watched Michael's journey from the brother who accidentally killed his sibling to the undead man trying to burn away his father's legacy. The indie game that started it all was created by Scott Cawthon, who had been making family-friendly games before 5 Nights at Freddy's. When one of his earlier games was criticised for having characters that looked creepy, Scott decided to lean into that and make something actually creepy. He created the first 5 Nights at Freddy's game and released it in August of 2014. Nobody expected it to become the phenomenon that it did. The game became hugely popular, especially with YouTubers who played it and shared their reactions to the scares. Within just a few months, Scott had released a second game, then a third, then more and more, building this huge interconnected story. The franchise grew beyond just games. There were novels that explored parallel versions of the story, giving more insight into characters and events. There were guidebooks that explained mechanics and provided hints about the lore. There was merchandise with the characters on t-shirts, posters, and action figures. There were fan games created by people inspired by the series, and eventually there was a movie released in October of 2023, bringing the story of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza to theatres and introducing a whole new audience to the horror of the animatronics. The Five Nights at Freddy's community became one of the most dedicated fan bases in gaming. People created detailed timelines trying to figure out the exact order of events. They analysed every frame of every minigame looking for clues. They created theories about characters and their connections. Some of these theories turned out to be correct, confirmed by later games. Others were proven wrong or remain uncertain. The community created art, animations, music, and stories based on the world of Five Nights at Freddy's. It became more than just a game series. It became a shared experience of trying to solve a mystery together. What makes William Afton such a memorable villain is how he keeps coming back. He died in the Spring Bonnie suit and became Springtrap. He burned in the fire at Fazbear's Fright, but survived as Scraptrap. He burned again in Henry's Trap, but his spirit persisted as a computer virus called Glitch Trap. He infected Vanessa and tried to return through her as Vanny. He appeared as Burn Trap in the Pizzaplex, still clinging to existence. William Afton represents this idea that evil is very hard to completely destroy, that the consequences of terrible actions can persist long after the person who did them is gone. The character of Michael Afton serves as a redemption arc within the story. He started as a bully who made the worst mistake of his life. That mistake killed his brother and set off a chain of events that destroyed his family. But Michael spent the rest of his life and his undead existence trying to make things right. He worked at the various Freddy locations trying to free the spirits. He followed his father's trail trying to stop him. He allowed himself to be used as bait in Henry's final trap. Michael shows that it's possible to try to fix your mistakes, even if you can never fully make up for them. Henry Emily is a tragic figure as well. He created entertainment to bring joy to children, but his creations were used as tools for murder. His daughter was killed. His business partner became a monster. Everything he built was corrupted into something terrible. In the end, Henry had to destroy it all, including himself, to finally bring peace to the souls that had been trapped. His final speech in Pizzeria Simulator is heartbreaking as he apologizes to everyone who suffered and promises that their nightmare is finally ending. The murdered children are perhaps the most tragic of all. They were innocent kids who went to a pizza restaurant expecting to have fun. Instead, they were lured away by someone they trusted, someone in a costume they recognized, and killed. Their bodies were never found by their families. They couldn't move on to an afterlife. They were trapped in animatronic suits, unable to communicate what happened to them, driven by anger and confusion to attack anyone who came near at night. For years, probably decades, they were stuck in this state. Only when Henry's fire burned hot enough to destroy the remnant binding them were they finally freed. The story also explores themes of memory and identity. The animatronics are possessed, but they're not always fully aware of what they are or what happened to them. They have fragments of memories, feelings of anger and fear and sadness, but they're mixed with the animatronic programming. The puppet seems to have more awareness than the others, actively trying to help the other children. Golden Freddy, possessed by Cassidy, who suffered the worst death, seems to have the most anger and power, able to manifest as hallucinations and cause crashes in the game systems. William Afton loses more and more of his humanity each time he comes back, until he's just a malevolent presence trying to continue his work without even fully remembering why. The later games introduce the idea that some of the horror might come from AI learning the wrong lessons rather than from possessed souls. The mimic learned by watching and copying behaviour. If it saw violence, it learned violence. If it saw deception, it learned deception. This adds another layer to the horror because it suggests that sometimes monsters are created not by supernatural means, but by technology being used incorrectly or learning from bad examples. The mimic doesn't have a soul or possess malice in the way William Afton does. It simply learned to hurt people because that's what it observed, which is terrifying in its own way. The setting of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza taps into a very specific kind of nostalgia and discomfort. Many people who played these games grew up going to places like Chuck E. Cheese or Showbiz Pizza, restaurants with animatronic performers. These places were meant to be fun and magical for children, but there was always something slightly unsettling about the animatronics. They moved in jerky, mechanical ways. Their eyes seemed to follow you. Their smiles were frozen and too wide. At night, when the lights were off, you could imagine these characters becoming something sinister. Five Nights at Freddy's takes that childhood unease and turns it into full horror. The games also play with the idea of working a terrible job. The night guard position at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza is presented as a low-paying security job. The phone guy in the first game casually mentions things like how the animatronics might try to stuff you into a suit, or how previous guards have complained about the characters trying to get into the office, and he talks about it like it's just a normal workplace annoyance. There's dark humour in presenting deadly situations as if they're just inconvenient parts of a minimum wage job. It reflects how real jobs sometimes expect employees to put up with dangerous or unreasonable conditions just to make a paycheck. The progression of technology in the games reflects real advances in animatronics and AI. The early characters like Fredbear and Spring Bonnie were crude by modern standards, with their dangerous spring-lock mechanisms. The classic animatronics from the first game were simple, following basic programming and predetermined paths. The toy animatronics in the second game had facial recognition and more advanced movement. The Funtime animatronics had voices and personality, able to speak and interact. By the time we get to the glam rock animatronics in Security Breach, they have full artificial intelligence, personalities, the ability to learn and adapt, and sophisticated sensors. This technological progression mirrors our real world's advancing robotics, and it asks uncomfortable questions about what happens when intelligent machines are created for the wrong purposes or become corrupted. The design of the animatronics themselves is brilliant from a horror perspective. In their normal state, they look friendly and colourful, designed to appeal to children. Freddy is a cute bear with a bow tie. Chica is a cheerful chicken. Bonnie is a friendly rabbit. But when you see them in the dark, when they're hunting you, when they're damaged and broken, they become nightmarish. Their jaws hang open too wide. Their eyes are dead and staring. Their movements are wrong, too fast or too jerky. The contrast between what they're supposed to be and what they've become makes them more frightening than if they'd been designed as monsters from the start. Each location in the Five Nights at Freddy's timeline tells its own story even beyond the main events. Fredbear's family diner was the innocent beginning before tragedy struck. The original Freddy Fazbear's Pizza was where William's crimes began. The 1987 location with the toy animatronics represents an attempt to move past the tragedy with new technology, but the evil of the place couldn't be escaped. The smaller location in 1993 was a failing business, trying to survive on nostalgia and a limited budget. Fazbear's Fright was an attempt to profit off of tragedy and urban legends, turning real horror into entertainment. The Pizzeria Simulator location was a trap disguised as a new beginning, and the Mega Pizzaplex was a massive corporate attempt to rebrand everything as shiny and new, but built literally on top of the old horrors. The phone calls throughout the series serve as both tutorials and story delivery. The phone guy in the early games sounds cheerful even as he's explaining how you might die. He mentions previous employees being killed as if it's just an unfortunate workplace accident. He gets more nervous as the week goes on, and in the first game you eventually hear him get killed by the animatronics during one of his calls. In Sister Location, the phone calls become more sinister as you realise you're being guided to your doom. The casual tone of these messages contrasts sharply with the actual danger you're in, creating a disconnect that makes everything more unsettling. The mini-games between nights and in secret areas are some of the most important parts of the story, even though they look simple. These games use very basic pixelated graphics that look like they're from the 1980s, but in these simple mini-games, you see the murders happen. You see children following Spring Bonnie. You see bodies being stuffed into suits. You see the Bite of 83 from the perspective of the crying child. You see William Afton dismantling the animatronics and then dying in the Spring Bonnie suit. These mini-games don't explicitly explain what's happening. They show you events and let you piece together the meaning, which makes the revelations more impactful when you figure them out. The newspapers and documents scattered throughout the games provide concrete details about the timeline. They mention the missing children incident. They talk about the restaurants closing down. They provide clues about dates and events. But they also show how the public perceived these events versus what actually happened. The newspapers report children going missing, but they never reveal that the bodies were stuffed into animatronics. The company statements talk about technical difficulties and temporary closures, trying to maintain a family-friendly image while horrible things were happening behind the scenes. This gap between public knowledge and hidden truth is part of what makes the story feel more real and more disturbing. The role of Fazbear Entertainment as a company throughout the series is interesting. They're clearly aware that terrible things keep happening at their locations, but they prioritize the business over safety or morality. They cover up incidents. They reopen restaurants despite the dangers. They cut corners on security. They eventually try to cash in on their own dark reputation by allowing Fazbear's Fright to be created. In the modern era, they create the Help Wanted VR game and the Mega Pizzaplex, trying to turn their history into entertainment and profit. The company represents corporate negligence and the prioritization of money over human life, which is a very real kind of evil that exists in our world. The music and sound design in the games contributes enormously to the atmosphere. Each game has its own theme song, often featuring children singing or music box melodies that sound innocent but become creepy in context. The ambient sounds during gameplay, the hum of electronics, the distant footsteps, the breathing sounds all work together to create tension. The sudden loud sounds when an animatronic moves or appears make you jump, and each animatronic often has their own signature sound, whether it's Foxy's running footsteps, Freddy's music box tune, or the Balloon Boy's laugh. These sounds become triggers that make players panic even when they hear them out of context. The jump scares in Five Nights at Freddy's became iconic. They're sudden, they're loud, and they feature the animatronics' faces filling the screen with jaws open and eyes wide. Some criticise the games for relying too much on jump scares rather than other forms of horror, but the jump scares serve a purpose. They're the consequence of failure, the punishment for letting your guard down or making a mistake. The fear doesn't come from the jump scare itself, but from the tension of trying to avoid it, from knowing that if you mess up or if your power runs out or if you don't check the right camera at the right time, that jump scare is coming. The anticipation of the scare is often worse than the scare itself. Different characters in the community have become favourites for different reasons. Foxy gained popularity as a character because of his unique gameplay mechanics and his status as what fans call a good guy, with theories suggesting he tried to protect children rather than harm them. Circus Baby became compelling because of her tragic backstory and her complex relationship with her father and brother. The puppet is fascinating as a character who seems to be trying to help rather than harm, guiding the other spirits. Golden Freddy is mysterious and powerful, able to appear and disappear, seemingly existing outside the normal rules. Each animatronic has fans who create art and stories about them, exploring their personalities and potential motivations beyond what the games explicitly show. The novels written by Scott Cawthon and other authors explore alternate versions of the story, and while they're not exactly the same as the game timeline, they provide insight into how things might have happened. The Silver Eyes trilogy follows a young woman named Charlie, who is revealed to be a robot created by Henry Emily after his daughter Charlotte was killed. These books explore themes of identity, grief, and what it means to be human. They show different versions of William Afton's crimes and different ways the animatronics might be possessed. The Fazbear Frights books are collections of short horror stories set in the Five Nights at Freddy's universe, each exploring different aspects of the lore and introducing new terrifying concepts. The movie that came out in 2023 took a different approach to the story, creating its own version of events while keeping the core concepts intact. It followed a security guard named Mike Schmidt, who takes a job at the abandoned Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. The film explored themes of guilt, family, and the consequences of past actions. It brought the animatronics to life using a combination of practical effects and CGI, making them look as close to the game designs as possible. For fans who'd been following the story for years, seeing these characters realised in live action was a dream come true, even if the movie's plot differed from the game timeline. The impact of Five Nights at Freddy's on indie gaming and horror gaming in general cannot be overstated. It showed that a solo developer could create something that would compete with big-budget horror games. It proved that simple mechanics could be terrifying if executed well. It demonstrated that players wanted to engage with complex lore and piece together stories themselves, rather than having everything explained to them. After Five Nights at Freddy's became successful, there was an explosion of indie horror games trying to capture similar elements, games set in one location where you had to survive against sinister characters, games with hidden lore and secret story elements, games that relied on tension and jump scares. The series also had a huge impact on internet culture and content creation. YouTubers and streamers built careers partly on playing Five Nights at Freddy's games and reacting to the scares. Theorists like MatPat from Game Theory created dozens of videos analysing the lore, proposing timelines, and explaining the story's mysteries. Some of these theories were so well researched and compelling that Scott Cawthon himself acknowledged them, and even incorporated fan theories into later games. The community's engagement with the series helped shape what the series became, creating a unique relationship between creator and fans. The character of Vanny and the glitch trap virus represent a new evolution of William Afton's evil. Even after his physical body was destroyed multiple times, even after his soul should have been obliterated in Henry's fire, some essence of him survived in the digital realm. This reflects modern fears about technology and how malicious programs can spread and corrupt systems. Glitch Trap spreading through the VR game and infecting Vanessa's mind is like a computer virus, but it's also possession, blending technological and supernatural horror. It suggests that William Afton's obsession with immortality finally succeeded in a twisted way, his consciousness living on as corrupted data. The Mega Pizzaplex itself is a character in Security Breach. The massive building with its many levels, attractions and hidden areas creates a sense of being lost in a place that's too big to fully understand. During the day, it would be bright and cheerful, full of children and families having fun. But at night, when it's empty and dark, it becomes a maze where every corner might hide a threat. The juxtaposition of the colourful commercial environment with the danger lurking within it creates a unique type of horror. You're not in a run-down, abandoned building like in previous games. You're in a state-of-the-art facility that should be safe but isn't. The daycare attendant from Security Breach, with its two personalities of sun and moon, represents a different kind of threat. During the lights-on phase, Sun is friendly but frantic, desperately trying to keep the lights on because it knows what happens when they go off. When the lights go out, Moon emerges, hunting through the darkness. This character embodies the dual nature of many elements in Five Nights at Freddy's. The friendly facade that hides something dangerous, the constant tension between day and night, safety and threat. Glamrock Freddy stands out as perhaps the first truly good animatronic in the series. While other animatronics were either possessed by vengeful spirits or corrupted by evil influences, Glamrock Freddy chooses to help Gregory. He protects the boy, hides him, and works with him to escape. He even goes against the other animatronics and the systems of the Pizzaplex to keep Gregory safe. This shows that the animatronics themselves aren't inherently evil. They're tools that can be used for good or corrupted for bad purposes. Glamrock Freddy represents hope, the idea that not everything created by Fazbear Entertainment has to be tainted by the company's dark history. The ending of Security Breach, where Gregory and Freddy confront Burntrap, brings the story full circle. Here's Michael Afton's son, or at least a child, standing in for the children who've been victims throughout this story, finally facing down William Afton one more time. The fire that destroys Burntrap echoes the fire that Henry set in Pizzeria Simulator. It's another attempt to burn away the evil that refuses to die. Whether this finally succeeds, or whether some piece of William will return again, remains to be seen as the story continues. The Mimic as an antagonist is different from William Afton, because it doesn't have malicious intent in the same way. William chose to kill children, chose to experiment with Remnant, chose to keep coming back. The mimic simply learned behaviours and repeated them. It learned to mimic voices, to mimic movements, to mimic violence. In some ways, this makes it more unsettling because you can't reason with it or appeal to any humanity it might have. It's not evil, it's just programmed wrong, and that programming makes it incredibly dangerous. The mimic represents fears about artificial intelligence learning from bad data, and then acting on those learned behaviours without understanding the harm they cause. The environmental storytelling throughout the series reveals so much about what happened in these locations. The blood and handprints on the walls in some areas show where people tried to escape. The out-of-order signs on certain animatronics hint at malfunctions or incidents. The placement of security cameras shows what the company was trying to monitor. The locked doors and hidden rooms reveal areas where something bad happened that management wanted to keep secret. The condition of the buildings themselves, from well-maintained to falling apart, tells you about the timeline and the company's financial situation at different points. You can learn about the story just by paying attention to the environments you're in. The progression of night guards throughout the series shows how the danger evolved. The guards in the early games were just regular people trying to do a job, with no idea what they were getting into. By sister location, Michael knew what he was walking into, but did it anyway to try to find his sister and stop his father. In Security Breach, Gregory isn't even supposed to be there. He's a child who got trapped and has to survive. Each guard or protagonist represents a different relationship to the horror of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, from innocent victims to purposeful agents trying to end the cycle. The concept of remnant as a physical substance that contains soul energy is one of the more interesting supernatural elements of the series. It's never fully explained how it works. It seems to be what keeps spirits bound to the animatronics, and what kept Michael alive after being scooped. Williams' experiments with remnants show his scientific approach to the supernatural. He wasn't just killing children out of pure evil, though he was certainly evil. He was trying to understand something, to capture and control the essence of human life and consciousness. His obsession with immortality drove him to do terrible things in pursuit of knowledge that humans shouldn't have. The safe rooms in various Freddy locations are important to the story. These were rooms that weren't on the official floor plans, that didn't appear on security cameras, that could be sealed off and hidden. They were where the spring lock suits were stored, and they became places where horrible things could happen without witnesses. William used safe rooms to hide bodies and evidence. He died in a safe room, sealed away behind a wall. The existence of these hidden spaces within the restaurant shows how the company built in places where their dark secrets could be kept, suggesting they knew or suspected that terrible things would happen. The theme of children being victims runs throughout the entire series. Every major tragedy involves a child being hurt or killed. The Bite of 83 killed a child. William's murders targeted children. Elizabeth was killed as a child. The spirits possessing the animatronics are children. Even in Security Breach, Vanny is hunting children, and Gregory is a child trying to survive. The series forces us to confront the horror of children being in danger, of innocence being destroyed, of young lives being cut short. It's disturbing because children should be protected, and places like Freddy Fazbear's Pizza are supposed to be safe spaces for kids. The violation of that safety is fundamentally upsetting. The repetitive nature of the games, surviving 5 nights over and over, creates its own kind of horror. You know the pattern. Each night gets harder. The animatronics get more aggressive. New threats appear. By night 5, you're barely surviving. And then there are often bonus nights that are even harder, pushing you to your absolute limit. This repetition mirrors how the cycle of violence in the story keeps repeating. William kills children. The spirits seek revenge. More people die. Attempts are made to end it, but it keeps coming back. The gameplay structure reflects the story structure. The fact that the story is still continuing, still being added to with new games and new revelations, means that the nightmare isn't over. Even after everything we've discussed, there are still mysteries. What exactly is the mimic's full origin? How many children did William really kill in total? Are there other spirits we haven't encountered yet? What happened to Vanessa after the events of Security Breach? Did Cassie survive? Is there any piece of William Afton still out there? The unanswered questions keep fans engaged and theorising, waiting for the next game or book that might provide more pieces of the puzzle. Five Nights at Freddy's succeeds as horror because it works on multiple levels. On the surface, it's scary video games with effective jump scares and tense gameplay. One level deeper, it's a mystery to solve, a timeline to piece together, a story to uncover. Deeper still, it's about real fears like corporate negligence, child endangerment, technology going wrong, and evil that refuses to die. And at its core, it's about tragedy, about lives destroyed by one person's terrible choices, about spirits that can't rest, about the long shadow that violence casts over everyone it touches. The legacy of Five Nights at Freddy's is secure at this point. It's been around for over a decade now. It spawned numerous games, books, merchandise, a movie, and countless fan creations. It's influenced a generation of game developers and content creators. It's created a shared language and set of references that millions of people understand. When someone mentions Freddy Fazbear or says Five Nights at Freddy's, people know immediately what that means. The series has become a permanent part of gaming history and horror culture. What makes the story resonate with people is that underneath all the supernatural elements and the sci-fi concepts, it's about very human things. It's about guilt and trying to make things right. It's about loss and grief. It's about children being hurt and the desire to protect them. It's about facing your fears. It's about evil people doing evil things and the long-term consequences of those actions. It's about ordinary people finding themselves in extraordinary and terrifying situations. These human elements ground the story and make it more than just a series about killer robots. The future of Five Nights at Freddy's is still being written. Scott Cawthon handed over the development of the main games to Steelwall Studios, but remains involved with the franchise. New games are in development. More books are planned. There's talk of sequels to the movie. The Mimic storyline seems to be setting up the next major arc of the series, and knowing this franchise's history, there will be new twists, new revelations, and new mysteries to solve. The story that started with a simple indie game about surviving 5 nights as a security guard has grown into something much larger, a sprawling narrative that has captured the imagination of millions of people around the world. So that's the history of 5 Nights at Freddy's, from the founding of Fredbear's Family Diner in the 1970s to the events at the Mega Pizzaplex in the modern day. It's a story of tragedy and horror, of evil and revenge, of spirits trapped and unable to rest, of families destroyed and people trying to make things right. It's about creepy animatronics that sing and dance during the day but hunt in the darkness. It's about mysteries hidden in minigames and newspaper clippings, about timelines that fans have spent years trying to perfect. And most importantly, It's a story that continues to evolve and expand, keeping fans engaged and theorising about what happened, what's happening now, and what will happen next in the dark and frightening world of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. Thanks for staying with us through this whole journey. We hope this helped you understand the full story, and maybe even helped you drift off to sleep. Sleep well, and don't let the animatronics get you. Good night.